Hey guys, how's it going? Eli here, back with another video where today we're going to be having a conversation about some Pokemon market updates, as well as taking a look at is modern investing still viable, especially considering all the factors that we're going to be talking about in regards to junk slabs and then just modern reprints. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as always, we do weekly giveaways, and Monday is the day we announce the winners. As always, if you want to enter in, make sure you leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We post content each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for you to be able to enter in. And since you can comment and like in each video, it allows you for multiple entries. And then we have 3 winners each and every week. So today we are announcing our 3 winners. Let's do a little bit of a drum roll while I take my face away from the camera. Maddox FL, Spec God, and Vexel, congratulations to you 3. As always, if you want to claim your prizes, please feel free to either join the Discord in the link down below. You can private message me. I'm a lot better at responding to that. Or you can try and send me an email. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Been a little behind since I was on vacation as of last week, so I do apologize on that. But congratulations once again to you guys. But now that we have gotten that out of the way, jumping into today's topic. So, a little bit of a market update. Basically, we're just going to kind of go over and talk about some of the prices on expected Pokemon product right now and what we kind of see for the next couple of months to end of year as far as price dropping goes. So, obviously, if we're just looking at sealed product and we're just seeing overall prices, Evolving Skies booster boxes have started to come down slightly. Obviously, we didn't expect this to happen all at once. Typically, a lot of these crashes half the time, they're very much, how do I want to say this? They look like this on a chart. Unless it's like a full-on reprint wave from like, your initial 1, 2, or 3 wave, it's usually a slow climb down. Now, this, of course, looks like it had a little bit of retrieval, then went back up, but overall, we're hoping to see a little bit more of downward price action within relatively near future. Obviously, for those people that know, average price outside of TCG Player, it's selling for around 130, 135. I think I've seen as low as 120, but that sells out like extremely fast. So hoping to see some more downward price action with that. Pokemon Go Elite Trainer boxes, as expected, at below MSRP. Astral Radiance booster boxes at $100. Pre-orders for Lost Origins already at $100. So yeah, prices are, starting to drop, thankfully, on most things. Brilliant Star is kind of the one where we're waiting on as far as a reprint or any sort of price action to go down. Obviously, had that conversation with you guys not that long ago. Brilliant Stars, there's supposed to be a reprint at the end of June. Got pushed back to July, and then it just got pushed back all the way until the expectation is sometime around Lost Origins release. So just more and more delays, and we're really gonna be expecting to see hopefully some large reprints coming sometime around Lost Origins near the end of the year. Made videos about this, I've talked about this. This is when the Pokemon Company likes to do these reprints. So hopefully we should really see a large amount of that, especially since the standard format got pushed back to early next year, and the Pokemon Company likes to only do reprints for what's in the standard competitive format for the TCG game, because of course they want to make sure that the cards that are competitively viable are as cheap as possible for those playing the game. Now, the question I get asked a lot of the things that we are really going to be centering our conversation around is, Eli, with all these reprints going on, Eli with, of course, PSA reopening back up at $18, is it at a point where it's extremely viable to be able to, invest in a lot of these, PSA graded cards? Is it a point right now where it's, worth it to be able to invest in a lot of these booster boxes that are getting reprints? Because, of course, everyone's saying, well, Evolving Sky, super high demand set, but if it does go down to $90, it does go down to $100, is it just a brick at that point because you're like, it's, been printed so much, it's never going to go anywhere? So we'll start off with that initial response, and then I'll get into kind of the junk slab of it all. But, gave a brief market update and then talking about the implications for the future of these reprints. So first and foremost, whether it be Evolving Skies, whether it be Fusion Strike, whether it be Chilling Reign, whether it be any of these sets, right? Unless it's a very, very low demand set, reprints are never a bad thing typically. And let me explain what I mean by that. Like I said before, if it's a low demand set, that's one thing, because if you had like a Crimson Invasion or like a Steam Siege reprint, no one cares, right? These sets, dud sets, arguably some of the worst sets of all time. And so you're saying to yourself, no one really likes these sets to begin with. And so the expectation is that if they're already at a low price, obviously, let's say they were at $80 nowadays, and you get another reprint, it's just going to drive the price down even further. But if you have a high demand set, like let's say Evolving Skies, or let's say that the price of Vivid went all the way up to 140, 150, Darkness is at 140, 150 for booster boxes, and you have a reprint and it goes down to 80, it goes down to 90, it goes down to 100, and let's say you get another reprint that drops it down into the 70s to the 80s. Are you now saying to yourself that that set that at one point did hit $150 can't get there again? And I know obviously there's some fallacies in regards to just because it's hit there once doesn't mean it's going to hit it again. But when we talk about it from comparing it to stocks versus sealed product, I think it's a little bit of a different situation, because you can make that argument with companies, but when you're talking about demand for sealed product, it's inflationary in a way different way than it is a large company or like a crypto or a commodity, right? The way in which it is represented, because there's more supply going into existence, not a general lack of demand for the overall product itself, because instead of having high demand, low supply, we now have a higher supply than what is the high demand. And so at that point, it either balances itself out, or the supply becomes greater than the demand, and the demand becomes lower than that of the supply, which of course in turn causes the prices to go down. So it's just general, basic supply and demand economic theory. With that, of course, being said, now you're saying to yourself, all right, Eli, so if at that point you do see that high of a supply with the amount of product that's being printed nowadays compared to what was being printed in, say, EX era, Diamond and Pearl era, very, very scarce eras, is it as investable? Or even some people will say as WotC product, is it as investable? And honestly, the question to that is yes, and I'll explain why. You have to understand it from a scalability chart, because this is something that I've actually explained before on a live stream, and I'll actually try and do one for you right now. So when you're talking about trying to give a explanation of how supply and demand is typically going to work, you have to understand the supply and demand curve theory. So basically, just taking a look at this, and obviously there's different ways and methods in which this is kind of explained. And this is also very similar to how, there's different theories on taxation and so on and so forth, but this is just one of the general basic things that they kind of explain to you, right? So let's say, for example, you've got, just for the sake of this, because I don't want to do too much, let's say you've got 10 people interested in WotC booster boxes, and you've got 10 booster boxes that are available, right? You have just an even overall chart. That chart is just going to be at an even, steady increase, because you have the demand, you have the chart, exponentially, it's just going to steadily climb because of the overall one-to-one ratio. Obviously, you can put that in the hundreds, you can put that in the thousands, but typically speaking, you're just saying you have that one-to-one ratio of demand, and the value of that product is therefore going to continue to go up. Now, let's say you have yourself 100 supply of booster boxes, but then you only have a demand of that of 10 people. Well, now you have an issue with oversupply. So typically speaking, what will happen is you'll have your initial demand price on the product. It'll typically go up, or if a product, for example, let's say doesn't have a good opening, it's like a crappy set, people don't really care, then the price for that product is immediately just going to go flat. It's going to just have a downwards trend. So that's because you've got such a high supply compared to a much lesser demand for a certain product. Now, of course, if it is in the opposite direction, when you're talking about the overall curvature, and you're saying to yourself, all right, there's only 10 boxes, but there is 100 people, of course, like I said, giving this example, you're then going to see a natural curvature with the overall price of this product going up like this. Because exponentially what's going to happen is you already have an extremely high demand. I'm sorry, actually, wait. I'm misexplaining this wrong. I gotta erase this. We didn't get to the curvature part. Sorry. Naturally speaking, you're going to see the product to something like this, just straight up shot, because you have such a high demand, such a low supply. You're going to see that kind of exponential chart just going straight up to the moon. So, of course, once again, going with it, it's a very much so high demand, low supply. Where is it exactly that you're saying to yourself, this is going to make a difference when you're talking about the scalability if something like this, for example, were to instead be represented as in the 10,000s? Does that still change the overall curvature? Whether you want to draw it like this, sorry, this is supposed to be a little bit straighter, or whether you want to draw it like this. However you want to draw this, either way, the whole point of it is it's very much scalability. Because if you're saying, for example, that you have a very strong chart, if you're talking about first and foremost a 1-to-1 ratio, this is a more equal represented. If you have an item that's of equal ratio, but then the demand eventually picks up over time and the supply eventually goes down over time, then you have this almost supply-demand curvature on chart represented. So basically what that is telling you is you have a set supply that is here, and you have a set demand that is represented here. As the demand increases and the supply, of course, starts to dwindle, so you see here's the peak. Supply drops. You have your initial price drop that kind of comes, and then as that supply continues to go down, and as the demand either stays steady or continues to go up, you have that curvature where the supply continues to go up and the demand continues to go up, or it just stays the same. Of course, it'd be one thing if it was the supply is going down, but the demand is also going down, then you're more or less looking at something like this. So it's a lot more flatlined kind of going up rather than going straight up. But it's just, for the sake of drawing this, I just want to give a little bit of a visual representation so people can really see what necessarily I'm talking about. But of course, the point that I'm trying to make with this is, like I used in the example before with the 10-to-10 ratio, I'm using WOTC as the example. You're talking about in the WOTC era, you have certain product that was quote-unquote very low supply, which is even fake to say because actually the supply of WOTC era unlimited product, even first edition outside of the base set Shadowless and Shadowless, it's very much so like higher supply than most people realize, which is why you're talking about some EX era booster boxes, some Diamond and Pearl era booster boxes being worth more than some unlimited or first edition booster boxes, right? So with that, of course, taking that fallacy out of the way, and we're just having a general conversation about that 10-to-10 ratio versus that 10,000 to 10,000 ratio, what is the difference here, right? If you're saying that you have got, a lot less people in the hobby at that time, and you've got a lot less supply in the hobby at that time, and now with the hobby having grown exponentially, you have more people in the hobby today, and because of that, the Pokemon Company is printing to demand. Guess what? Nothing changes. The ratio is still 1-to-1. It doesn't change things whatsoever when you're talking about an overall supply-demand curvature. Everything is staying the absolute same. So for those people that are saying, Eli, what happens, of course, if you're saying to yourself, we're getting so much more so much more supply of products nowadays, is that going to, of course, overinflate the market? Well, if you have so much more demand and this is a deflationary asset, because guys, if it's a 1-to-1 ratio and you have 10,000 and you have, 10 times 10,000, it's 100, right? You've got, wait, no, it's 1,000. Sorry, I'm dumb. It's 1,000. You have, of course, 1,000 more people that are opening the overall product. And so your rate of deflation on this product is so much greater. So you really have to take it, of course, into consideration when you're talking about the difference between modern day sealed product. Obviously, at the end of the day, what really comes down to it is what is the general ratio, no matter what, if it is ultramodern, no matter what, if it is older in WotC. Of course, you're going to say to yourself, as exponentially speaking, certain products begin to go up in price, there's an argument to be made that demand will inevitably begin to go down. It will find its kind of slope point, and then it'll eventually stay stagnant, and then over time more people will eventually come back into the market, more people will eventually find that the value of that product should be higher, and then you'll see kind of this is your long-term chart in a healthy market, because you want that initial high demand, supply dwindles, then the demand starts to leave the market, you see a little bit of a price correction, and then you see the high demand pick up because more people are coming into the market, then you start to see that price correction, and so on and so forth. That's what a healthy market looks like. That's what we've basically seen in this market today. We, of course, saw WotC era really pick up a lot of steam with the Pokemon hobby, since it was, of course, the introduction to Pokemon itself. EX era, Diamond and Pearl era, Black and White era, this is kind of where you had that little bit of a decline, you had that slump. Guess what picked it back up again? We're talking about, of course, the XY Evolutions 2016 Pokemon Go bubble. That is what eventually caused the price to go back up. And then eventually we had a little bit of a correction. And now what you're seeing, of course, with even greater, obviously these are not representative because the bubbles are so much greater, but I only have so much, room to explain this. But then you've got your 2020, Pokemon Go, Logan Paul, whatever you want to call it. And now we're going to see a descension of that. This is just how a healthy market works. So at the end of the day, as long as the Pokemon company is not overdoing with sets and printing things into the ground, I think you shouldn't have anything to worry about. But even in instances where they have printed things in the ground, we've still seen that everything is going to be okay. Take a look at Evolution's product, for example. We go from market high to low. Obviously, we're talking about some of the most expensive items is the Evolution's booster case. Obviously, this is not representative of the actual market price when it says $7,256. It is more like this valuation. We can see some of the recent sales, but you're talking about booster boxes of this price being sold for, at its peak, $1,200 and so much more, when not that long ago you were able to pick it up for so much cheaper. And I mean we can take a look and see if the value is going to be represented on this chart, but let's find out. Evolutions booster box. They don't have enough history to go back to early 2020, but we can kind of just see what the overall peak was at one point. Yeah, we're not going to be able to see it, but $800 kind of went down for a little bit, then went up, and then it's kind of coming down a little bit. But Evolutions, man, this used to be literally in 2020, I think as high as $100 midway into the summer, and then you all of a sudden saw that explosion kind of happen with the overall price of Evolutions, which was arguably one of the most high printed sets of all time. And yet, this is where it is right now. I mean, you had Evolutions packs being thrown into Sun and Moon era product. You had Evolutions packs being thrown up into early Sword and Shield era product. So this is a set that came out in 2016 and was still being shown in 2020. So, time is only going to, of course, make it more valuable as scarcity increases. Now, once again, talking about Evolving Skies, hypothetically speaking, if Pokemon Company were to print this into the ground, prices go to $100. Not going to change my mind on anything, especially if it only goes to 100. I mean, you'd realistically be hoping it goes to 90 to 80. Highly unlikely that would happen, but for the sake of this argument, even if it did, even if it went down to 70 because the supply was so great and demand was so low, just see it as a buying opportunity at that point, because naturally the curvature of demand will continue to go up over time as you start to see more people filter into the market after having a bearish kind of trend for a longer period of time, and then a resolution that eventually turns around to be bullish again as these prices drop. Now, the next point of conversation we're going to be having, obviously that was a long conversation about sealed product. We're now going to be having a discussion about overall sealed slabs. A little bit of a different conversation. I've talked about this before a little bit on stream. I've talked about this before a little bit on my videos, but my personal opinion on slabs, I'll just give you my personal opinion on this, and then I'll go into kind of the realization of what I'm thinking is more than likely going to happen for the future of just overall grading cards. Talked about this a little bit on my Evolving Skies video, but basically my personal opinion, I think the future is BGS. I think although people might make an argument saying black labels shouldn't be as valued as much as they are, people are buying them for that much because of the rarity that you're going to be getting the value for that, especially as well just standard pristine 10s from BGS. Plus, subgrades are a lot more desirable nowadays, and although, of course, PSA is going to be the king when it comes to older product, let's say, for example, you're just going to be sending in your regular WotC era product, EX era, Diamond and Pearl, Black and White, you're able to still get a really good value for how much you're paying, especially considering the grading is so much easier than BGS. Ultra Modern, it's a completely different argument. I talked about this on my video with Evolving Skies. If you haven't already seen this part, you can probably skip a couple minutes in, but I'll go over it briefly. I think we're at a point right now where you're saying to yourself, the raw and the PSA 9s are starting to overlap one another, where you're having value of these 9s being worth almost just as much as these single cards. And not to mention the fact of the matter, we're sitting on a low supply of 9s right now, and these raw single cards, of course, are not doing any sort of, benefits to the PSA 9's valuation when you're going to see an increase in supply. I think that as you continue to see these crossovers between the two, you're inevitably going to have a crash of both items, because with the PSA 9 population going to naturally increase with the $18 being returned to PSA, and then with the natural supply as well going increase with the overall reprint of Evolving Skies, you're going to see a very much so downward trajectory with overall slabs and just raw cards in general. So the question, of course, needs to be asked, what is the future for overall, raw grading with PSA items? Already gave you my opinion on the very beginning of what I personally like, but if I'm being completely honest, do I think it's, still viable for you at this point to be grading ultra modern cards and try and flip it? In all honesty, it's possible if you are at a point right now where you feel pretty comfortable with yourself grading and you think you can get that kind of rate of return on these 10s, you can totally take that risk yourself. But then at the end of the day, if you hit that 9, you're going to be losing yourself money each and every time, and you're hoping that your ratio is going to be good for hitting those 10s. Of course, most people that were sending in for the $50, $30 price point, they, of course, were only sending in what they felt like was confident enough to get a 10, which is why you do see such a higher ratio of 10s to 9s, because most of the people at this point are pretty educated in regards to grading. If you're going to go that route, of course, you have to be very careful. Not financial advice, not a financial advisor, but do understand the risk to reward ratio when you're talking about the kind of differences between 9 to 10. And boy, oh boy, in my personal opinion, you're going to see these prices absolutely, start to drop incredibly as you start to see more and more people sending cards to be graded at PSA. Now, who knows? Maybe the demand is not going to be as high as I think it is, but for myself, personally speaking, $18 is an incredibly good price, considering when you factor in inflation and everything around us has gotten so much more expensive. I don't know why a $10 difference before to add an additional $8, of course, it sounds pretty high because it's an 80% increase, but in the grand scheme of things, when you talk about general prices of just overall goods nowadays, whether it be groceries, gas, so on and so forth, we've seen these percentages within the past year to 2 years be very much to the same exponential point. So ultimately, end of the day, I think you're going to start to see an era where, in all honesty, man, if you want my personal opinion, ultra modern grading is it's just not really there for profitability unless you're saying to yourself, I went and pulled this card and I want to send it in for grading. Obviously, that's a completely different story. But even then, at the end of the day, you can make an argument saying, well, I feel like my card's going to get a 9, and you're spending that $18, and then while you're waiting for it to come back, the price is just going down because more of that supply is going in. And then, of course, since the prices of the 9s are going down because the supply is going up while your card is being graded, and then you naturally have to see the value of the raws go down because if raws are more than PSA 9s, and there's an imbalance, and then it naturally causes issues within the overall market, because then why would you ever want to not or send your card in for grading for 9s if you can just sell raw for more? So it just causes issues overall in the market, and you're just kind of like a sitting duck, basically waiting to get wrecked while your cards are just not going to be getting the grades you want if you are expecting to get a 9. So the risk to reward is just so much greater in this kind of ultra modern era, especially when you're talking about slabs. I mean, this is something we can go even all the way back to something such as Hidden Fates, I mean, Hidden Fates product, let's take, for example, the Sylveon GX, obviously, right? You're talking about a population of 1,543, and this is an item that naturally has just had a supply increase exponentially, like its value is diminished, right? And I mean, if we want to go even out further than this, look at one point where we're sitting at $400, right? Back in early 2021. Just price down, price down, price down, price down, price down. We're talking about more than a 75% decrease. And the supply for these 10s are 1,543. Let's look at the difference between the 9 and the raw. Look at how closely these things have correlated. As the raw prices are being sent in for grading, then the grading prices go down, and then in turn the raw prices are going to go down. So the overall, of course, once again, risk to reward ratio of you at that point, you might as well just sell your card raw and then take the risk if you think it's going to get a 9 because it's a pretty weak 10 or it's a strong 9. You have to be able to calculate these things when you're taking these risks, even if the price is now $18 instead of $30 or instead of $50. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we're currently sitting at a point where these junk slabs, or as people like to call them, or this just oversupply, it's going to be a real issue. And now that's not to say, going back to it with my curvature chart, that you couldn't eventually see, let's say for the sake of this argument, going back to it, let's say, this goes to 2,000 by the end of the year, just for the sake of this argument, right? And you're saying there's 2,000 of this supply, and you realistically only have about, 1,000 people. So the demand ratio for this is half as much as the supply. It's completely different than if you were to take it like something such as a booster box, because booster boxes get opened. These products, the supply continues to grow over time as more gets graded. So the only way in which you're going to see a natural increase in this product, because once again, just drawing it this way, you're going to see basically as that supply just continues to go up and the demand in this current market continues to go down, it's going to be a natural decline continuously, kind of like what is being represented on this overall PSA 10 chart. The only way in which this can turn around is if, let's say for the sake of this argument, this now becomes 10,000. Then all of a sudden you have a level of scarcity because you have demand in the market. But as we've known many times before, what happens when the demand goes high? Well, then more people send in their product for grading, and then the supply goes up. Obviously, this is very much exaggerated, but you get the point of what I'm saying. This is exactly what we saw is within 2020 and the overall kind of PSA bubble, whatever you would like to call it. You had a lot of Timmies that basically said, oh, look, I can just send in my car for grading and I can make money. And so what ended up happening was huge demand pocket where the prices absolutely skyrocketed all the way up, and then everyone and their grandma decided, hey, let's all just send in our cards for grading because we can make money doing it. And then all of a sudden just an absolute plummet because everyone started to send it in. That's what happens at a certain point when the demand becomes so high and the supply is not able to basically level it out. Then more people are going to come in and increase the supply, whereas you can't do that necessarily with sealed product, which is why on average sealed product tends to be safer. Once again, that's not to say sealed product can't have its waves, as we've talked about before, because you do have general demand going down even if supply is, not increasing. So like you would with slabs, but these are just things that you really need to take into consideration when you're deciding for yourself, is it worth it that I invest overall in PSA slabs for ultramodern specifically, or is it worth it if I invest in sealed product for ultramodern? This is very much an ultramodern product. Like I said before, completely different conversation if you're talking about older products, because a lot of this is a lot lower pop. I mean, heck, man, let's just go take a look at some of the Sun and Moon era product from not Hidden Fates, and I can just have a conversation about, how much lower the supply is. Let's take a look at, let's say, a set like, what's a good one? Let's take a look at a set like Unbroken Bonds, right? So if we take one of the most expensive cards, right? You've got your Reshiram and your Charizard GX. Let's take the most expensive one next to that. Full Art Gardevoir. This is a card that came out literally maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Look at the value of how much this card is worth currently and how much it's dropped, and look at what the population report is on it. That is a very, very low pop, especially for an ultramodern card. Let's go back and take a look at another set, Cosmic Eclipse, for example. Okay, let's see what is some of the most expensive cards we have in, let's say, a PSA 10. Most expensive one you have is a Full Art Arceus Dialga and Palkia. Pretty cool card if I do say so myself. Population report, 348. Wow, that's pretty low for a PSA 9. Charizard and Braixen, let's see if it's any better or any worse. Okay, it's a Charizard card, as expected, around 1,000. Makes sense to me. But even then, necessarily speaking, you're talking about the Sun and Moon era stuff. That's pretty cheap, all things considered. Then we take a look at, let's say, a Rosa, for example, or even, let's say, a Pikachu Secret Rare. Pikachu Secret Rare is, relatively easy card to pull. So much higher with these cards. So you want to be able to take these things into consideration when you're going back and looking at some of these cards. Now, not to say, of course, that I don't want you to get this construed. If it is a low supply, that means it's necessarily a good investment. But what I am saying is that there are certain cards that are high demand, that are low supply, and you're saying to yourself, why is this so much lower supply than it should be? Obviously, Cosmic Eclipse, I wanted to try and see if we could make a draw comparison. Unbroken Bonds, of course, had a reprint a couple years back. Cosmic is still having product come in, so that's why Cosmic is such a higher supply. But if we're going back once again to Unbroken Bonds, Taking a look at the Charizard, 1,000, it's about appropriate. But a high demand card such as a Gardevoir and Sylveon, you're saying to yourself, really? Only $177 for that low of a supply, and it's the second most expensive raw card? You really got to understand and say to yourself, maybe there is some opportunity literally just slightly far on back when you're talking about Sun and Moon era stuff. I mean, even if we go all the way down to, let's say, I don't know, a set like Ultra Prism. Let's just take a look and see what's going on with Ultra Prism. Full Art Cynthia card. Let's see what the overall supply is this. 252 to 186. Got yourself a Full Art Lily. Your overall 446 to 323. You know, you're talking about a... gosh dang, guys. I mean, look at the prices on these, man. Glaceon, you know, Rainbow GX. I mean, we don't even have a value that's going to be put on these cards. The point I'm trying to make with this is everyone is so focused on investing in flipping a lot of these Sword and Shield era cards. However, if you really want to find the diamonds in the rough, you can go back to Sun and Moon era and you can find a lot of these cards that are still in the hundreds. You know, if you want to, you can go with the Charizards that are in the 1,000 to high, you know, hundreds range, 900, 800. Personally speaking, not my favorite. I'd much rather take these other high demand cards that are expensive raw and then take my chances on picking up their PSA 10s, which I think are undervalued for how much the population report is. Not financial advice, not a financial advisor. But if you are going to go investing in these single slabs, this is kind of going to be the way to do it in my personal opinion. Or if you even want to, man, and you do see that kind of imbalance between some of these cards in the Sun and Moon era, where you're saying, wow, this is a pretty cheap raw card when you really take a look at it, and then you say to yourself the value of what you can get if it does end up pulling a 10. And that's where you can have that conversation, of course, with the overall, you know, ratio. Take a look at the Full Art Cynthia card, for example. How much is it worth as an overall raw card? $86 TCG Marketplace. So what's the difference between that and 9? Not a good risk to reward ratio. You have a little bit better margins at the end of the day, but really not the best margins that you really want to be considering, for example. Taking a look at, say, a different card, let's say Full Art Gardenia, right? We go look at a card like Full Art Gardenia, and you're saying, once again, the same exact argument to yourself. How much are you buying it for? $33. Same level of risk. However, with that being said, the supply is so much lower. So much lower. This could, of course, change as prices have dropped, but I'm going to be, you know, willing to make a bet that a set that is now 4, 5, 6 years old with such a low supply and the disparity level between these 9s and 10s being so low, such a low pop, that a card like this is naturally going to be a lot stronger over time than a card that is part of Ultra Modern, Evolving Skies, that's, you know, not even the most expensive card in the set, has almost triple the population report for that specific card. Very low PSA 9 population, but like I said before, we're in a different era. And this card is only going to go up from here because PSA just opened up and Evolving Skies, of course, was shut down before that. If you really want me to go cherry picking and have a fun conversation, then we can really go back and take a look at what happened during Shining Fates, take a look at what happened during Champion's Path when you're talking about these overall population. Because if you want to take a look at how many Charizards there are, this is what's indicative of Ultra Modern grading. This is exactly what we're seeing. It's a Charizard nonetheless, but even cards such as, you know, non-Charizard cards, such as this Gardevoir VMAX. This is not a Charizard. This should not have 1,800 in the overall population for a 10. But everyone and their mother was sending them in for grading. And Champion's Path was a very high printed set. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make with this, if you really want to take your chances at this ultra modern investing, ultra modern, you know, slab grading, flipping, however you want to say it, I'd much rather take my chances going in, trying to find which sets have a disparity in regards to their overall PSA 9 pricing, because a lot of these Sun and Moon era cards, I don't know how many Sun and Moon era cards I've bought from TCG players sent in for grading, and I've almost always gotten a 9 or a 10. So risk is there because it's still part of, you know, risk to reward ratio is still pretty nice there, especially considering prices have dropped, and Sun and Moon era was literally not that long ago. You know, time moves fast in this, you know, world because of how many sets come out, but these sets are out of print, and so really focusing on those low print, or sorry, these low pop out of print sets is going to be a lot better of a focus in my personal opinion. But wrapping up the video, as always, kind of having that conversation about, you know, Is it still viable to invest in ultra modern steel product? Yes, it's a scalability at the end of the day in regards to supply and demand. As long as the market is healthy in Pokemon, then you're naturally going to see the supply go down and the demand go up for steel product because it is deflationary. As I mentioned before, is that the same situation in regards to ultra modern slabs? I think it's completely different because now everyone and their mother is aware of course, sending in cards for grading, and with a lot of these items still being in print, it's a lot sketchier than taking the risk on going back and sending in for grade a lot of these Sun and Moon era cards, which are out of print and less likely to have a higher supply over time, or at least a slower rate of scalability compared to the overall supply that is going to be coming in to the Sword and Shield era product that is still being printed today. Hopefully you guys found this video of benefit. Obviously a little bit longer this time around, but there was a lot to kind of have a conversation about, and I thought it was really important for you guys to take a look at these things. Once again, as always, not financial advice, not a financial advisor. So please do your own research when looking into these things, but I like to point out the distinctions so that people can really see what you're kind of looking for when you're sending in your cards for grading. You should never be going in with the mindset, I'm guaranteed a 10. You should always be going in with the mindset, you know, I'm going to get a 9. If I do get a 9, what are the overall best margins I'm going to be able to get with that grade? And then long term, if I do end up getting a 9 or a 10, is there any sort of viability in me sitting on and holding this card if I do think that I can find a long-term investment out of this? And for me personally, I'd much rather take that risk on high-demand cards that are in low-supply population, especially considering that some of them, there is a level of disparity in the Sun and Moon era. But as always, if you want to enter into our weekly giveaways, all you have to do is be subscribed, leave a like, and comment down below on any of our pre-recorded videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can do so on each one, which allows you for multiple opportunities to enter. And then, of course, we have 3 winners each and every week. But that is all for today's video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Until then, I will see you all on Wednesday. Peace.